In the far reaches of East Texas, where towering pine trees guard endless flatlands, an eerie legend took root. Between the years 1845 and 1881, isolated encampments emerged, claiming to offer spiritual redemption for the morally condemned. Over 300 individuals passed through these so-called sanctuaries. Barely any ever returned. Those who survived whispered about terrifying rites, masked as divine cleansing rituals, so severe that many begged for death before deliverance. When federal agents eventually invaded these sites in 1881, their discoveries went beyond fanatic devotion. Beneath earth, hardened by countless prayers, officials unearthed nearly 200 mutilated bodies. Each bore marks of prolonged agony, but it was the brothers' private documentation that exposed a sinister undercurrent, records so meticulous and disturbing that they unraveled a hidden empire of torture cloaked in salvation. This is the entire account of the most elusive mass murderers during America's frontier expansion, the Damnation Family. Before unfolding the tale, consider this: this platform brings forward only the most disturbing truths buried by time. If your resolve is steady and your mind is unshaken by horrors once forgotten, subscribe and mention your state in the comments. The shadows we now enter will force you to question everything regarding justice, redemption, and faith. Beneath the southern sun, the calendar marked 1845. Texas had just transitioned from independence to its new role as America's 28th state. The land sprawled wild, governed more by instinct than law. Fugitives, wanderers, and outlaws migrated here seeking absolution or ruin. On these rugged trails, stories began surfacing of three men offering forgiveness unlike any seen before, immediate spiritual relief through punishment of the body. Three siblings, preacher Malachi, evangelist Cornelius, and prophet Jebodiah, arrived from Arkansas, carrying endorsements from several Protestant congregations. Malachi, Damnation, the eldest, stood commanding and solemn, his silver-toned eyes piercing every soul he addressed. At 35, his voice swayed crowds between fear and awe. Cornelius, slim and pale, carried an eerie gift he could decipher, hidden guilt with uncanny precision. Many swore he possessed supernatural awareness. His specialty was extracting truth through relentless interrogation. Jebodiah, the youngest, resembled a blacksmith, strong, towering, and silent. He claimed divine visions, delivered harsh treatments, and declared them acts of holy repair. These brothers created multiple encampments in secluded terrain, bordering swamp and wilderness. From afar, their sanctuaries appeared simple tents encircling makeshift wooden crosses. Centered around blazing fire pits, their audience drifters running from justice, prostitutes escaping cruelty, deserters from battles, even clergy and merchants ashamed of private sins. Each person entered seeking transformation. Their doctrine was brutal sin could only be removed by physical torment. The soul must ascend through the agony of the body. Malachi would shout, his face lit by flickering flames. The wilderness echoed with cries of those hoping suffering could cleanse shame. Frontier newspapers began publishing miracle stories. Criminals emerged, reformed believers testified about rebirth, and skeptics became devoted missionaries. But behind the tailies, something monstrous was growing. In August 1847, a near-dead man staggered into Marshall, Texas. Samuel Hartwell, once muscular and confident, now looked hollow and ancient. His hair, once dark, had turned completely pale. His trembling hands clutched a Bible. His voice wavered between clarity and delirium. He described unspeakable scenes at one camp near Caddo Lake. He spoke of digging his own grave, being whipped with metal-laced leather, and hearing endless screams rising from beneath the soil. According to Hartwell, confession began upon arrival. Personal belongings were seized. Penitents received coarse burlap gowns. Brother Cornelius sat with each visitor, ledger in hand. Every misdeed, even the most minor, had to be revealed. If lies were suspected, Jebodiah intervened. His hands, Hartwell claimed, inflicted more pain than words could describe. The process continued through starvation, days without food, nights spent carving one's own burial space. Hartwell described being buried alive, his head barely above ground, while the brothers declared him spiritually deceased. He recalled faces of others being lowered into graves. None smiled. None embraced their fate. Many never resurfaced. What horrified Hartwell most was the cult-like adoration for death. The brothers insisted that dying during purification was a gift, a guaranteed path to paradise. Graves were marked with crosses, names added to something they called the redeemed. Survivors rarely spoke afterward. Lawmen dismissed Hartwell as unstable. No complaints had been filed. No one believed ministers with church endorsements could be capable of murder. The matter faded. Within weeks, Hartwell disappeared. No one knows where he went. Years passed. The camps shifted location every few months, always explaining it as divine instruction. Letters continued, arriving from so-called reformed souls, now serving in Oregon, California, or tribal regions. Families received appeals for financial support. But more and more sons and daughters vanished without farewell visits. Something was wrong. One mother, Eleanor Westbrook, doubted the letters allegedly sent by her missing son. Though similar in style, subtle handwriting inconsistencies troubled her. She hired a private investigator. Churches listed in the letters had never heard of her son. Addresses were fake. Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, a traveling physician, interviewed multiple camp survivors. They displayed trauma identical to war veterans. None would speak openly. Some cried at sudden sounds. One woman, Sarah Colby, whispered apologies to God without naming her sins. Another, Reverend Peter Hawkins, who had entered as an observer, emerged shaken, claiming he had seen deception disguised as divine work. He refused to describe what occurred, fearing others might investigate and be harmed. Then came Captain James Morrison, a calculated, disciplined Texas Ranger. Morrison noticed patterns. Others missed disappearances across counties, followed a path. Redemption camps were always nearby. In 1879, Morrison received a formal complaint from Senator Whitman. His nephew had entered a camp and never returned. Morrison began interviews. Over 60 vanishings shared a common link. They all ended those camps. Morrison wrote in his first report. Letters sent afterward bore identical phrases. Grammar mistakes were copied. Someone was fabricating correspondence. In Jefferson, Morrison met Tobias Fletcher, a former laborer for the camps. Drunk, shaking, and terrified, Fletcher described disposing of bodies. He confessed to burying victims under the guise of purification. Those prayers were for show, he muttered. They died begging. Fletcher described torture disguised as healing. Victims endured endless pain while confessing family secrets. Their relatives were then contacted for money. Fake missionary letters kept funds flowing. When asked where graves were located, Fletcher grew paranoid. They are everywhere, watching. You will vanish like the rest, he warned. That night Fletcher fled. No trace of him was ever found. Armed with this knowledge, Morrison assembled 3 trusted rangers, Sergeant Crawford, Corporal Santos, and Private Thompson. Their target, the latest camp near Caddo Lake. Traveling through dense forest and silent swamps, the team noticed something strange. No birds, no insects. Locals spoke of cursed ground trees, twisted unnaturally. No beast enters that land and returns unchanged, one hunter warned. From their hidden observation post, the rangers heard screams, not just pain but spiritual despair. The sound stopped, then resumed. All night at dawn, they crept closer. The ground was soft, disturbed, and smelled of decay. Over 60 fresh graves, simple wooden crosses. No names, only numbers. Inside, tense ceremonies mimicked church services, hymns versus sermons, but by afternoon, a mask-slipped screams returned. Brother Cornelius spent hours questioning each penitent. Details about inheritances, properties, debts were recorded. Jebodiah handled physical punishment. He used tools that should not exist. Private Thompson later said he knew how to break bodies without ending life. On the second night, a ritual called Ascension occurred. A man beaten beyond recognition was declared purified. Brother Malachi delivered a fiery sermon. Jebodiah ended his suffering. A number was added to the ledger. The grave was sealed behind the tents. Rangers found tools of forgery, fake church letters, counterfeit money maps of future camp locations. This was not faith, it was industry. On the third day, a family arrived, 2 parents too. Children. Morrison's resolve broke. I could not wait. Not with children, he later told officials. That evening, during a sermon, the Rangers launched their raid. Chaos erupted. Gunfire lit the night. Several cult members defended the brothers, even placing themselves in front of bullets. They thought we were devils. Thompson said they cried for their captor's safety. Cornelius grabbed a child, used him as shield. This boy is marked for grace. He declared coldly his end would be mercy. 1 bullet from Thompson saved the child. The brothers were captured inside their tent. Rangers found ledgers more horrifying than the graves. Victims were numbered, deaths recorded, torture methods categorized, family wealth noted. Some had been milked financially for years after their deaths. Autopsies confirmed abuse. Dr. Thornton's team uncovered signs of calculated experimentation, ways to maximize pain without causing fatal injuries. These methods were documented and tested like scientific trials. Tools were modified from religious artifacts. Manuals outlined how to identify weaknesses, gain trust, and exploit guilt. Letters began arriving from Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, all describing camps and missing relatives, matching the damnation pattern. The crime spanned decades, covered hundreds of miles, and manipulated thousands of lives. Trial proceedings began in Texas under national attention. Prosecutor Robert Maxwell called their crimes an attack on the foundation of morality. Defense lawyers claimed misguided passion, but survivor testimony, forensic evidence, and confessions buried that argument. Malachi remained unrepentant. We gave purpose to wasted lives, he said, stone-faced. Their suffering had meaning. Cornelius described confession as an art form. Jebodiah called pain a sacred truth. One survivor, Rebecca Marsh, spoke through tears. They thanked you for hurting them. They made you believe you were being saved. Former accomplice Jacob Wheeler exposed how they forged documents, predicted law enforcement movements, and planned expansions westward. He revealed escape maps and bribery trails. Shock came when the brothers' real names were revealed. Jacob Cornelius and Josiah Blackwood, con artists and murderers wanted since 1841. Their credentials were stolen. Their entire ministry was fiction. Jebodiah was not even family, but a discharged soldier notorious for prisoner cruelty. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. All were found guilty, sentenced to death. On November 15, 1882, before thousands, the 3 were hanged. Malachi's final words, history will praise us. Jebodiah's last statement chilled the crowd. We were not alone. The aftermath reshaped law enforcement. New systems were introduced. Dr. Thornton's work laid groundwork for future criminal profiling. Morrison received honors and led a multi-state task force. The grounds of the camps remain abandoned. Locals say cries can still be heard at night. The legend of the Damnation Family is more than horror. It is a warning. Sometimes the most terrifying evil is not hidden in shadows. It stands in daylight, quoting scripture and offering salvation at a price no soul should pay.